Hello and welcome to Real World Leadership. I'm your host, Susan Johnson, founder of Truth Enterprise Partners. And today at Real World Leadership, we do have a guest speaker with us on the topic of emotional intelligence. And I'll introduce you to our speaker in just a moment. Jeff Scott will be joining us shortly. A little bit about me and Truth Enterprise Partners. I've been founder of Truth Enterprise Partners since 2015. I work with a team of folks who really have a vision of leaders being diverse, authentic, and where truth is valued in the workplace. We are aiming to bring out the true potential in people. That's what we do. That's what drives us to get up every day. And we hope to be able to bring out the true potential in you. You can reach us at truthenterprisepartners.com. So a little bit about our speaker. We have Jeff Scott joining us today, who is an emotional intelligence practitioner. He's a corporate leader, entrepreneur, and a finance expert, and a community advocate. So we'll get to know Jeff in just a moment. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence. It's been referred to as different things for different people. It could be called EQ, emotional intelligence, emotional competence as well. But Jeff is going to break it down and share a lot more about that topic. But first, Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll do a quick icebreaker.
Yeah, so one, thank you, Susan, for having me on your program. So I have been in corporate America, financial services now for about 30 years now, primarily in relationship management. Institutional relationship management, to be more specific, working with corporations, for and with corporations, large and small. In addition to doing the emotional intelligence, I also happen to own a gym, by the way. So keep that in mind if you need some physical fitness activity. We really believe here at ME&I is that you start with yourself, and there is this wonderful connection between our hardware and our software. The hardware being the body that we have, and the software being our emotional state, our physical, our mental capacity, which is what drives that hardware. Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself, Jeff, and your business. And again, the fitness aspect of our being is very important. I want to do a quick icebreaker question. I've got some cards here for you. This will help us to get know you a bit better. So I'm going to pick a card, and then you just simply respond. How about that?
Let's go for it.
All right. All right. So the question I have for you, Jeff, is what brings you joy? What brings you joy? And if you don't like that one, I can draw another one, but what brings you joy?
You know, no, that's a good question. And over the years, that the response to that has probably would have changed. What brought me joy as a 20-year-old versus a 30-year-old versus a teenager versus where I'm at now. I'd say in my work, one of the things that brings me joy is working with someone and seeing their growth, seeing when they finally get it, how to become more successful in whatever way they define success, right? It finally is sinking in that this is that aha moment. And that is always something that's exciting to see when they understand it. And then it's even more exciting to see when they start to implement that aha moment, and you see that growth, you see that change in their attitudes, you see that change in their behavior. I think anyone who likes to coach, whether it's athletic coaching or professional coaching, that's one of the things that brings you joy. It's watching those that you're coaching grow and develop.
Absolutely. And I can totally relate to that. Being our mission is to bring out the joy and the potential in people. So I can totally see the connection to the mission we have at Truth Enterprise Partners. And that's what drives us every day, to see that change and behavior from point A to point B. Certainly does bring me joy as well, because I can relate to that. All right, so thank you for sharing that. And let's just dive into our topic of emotional intelligence. As I was mentioning, emotional intelligence can mean different things for different people. It's had different terms over the years. It's been called emotional intelligence, EQ, emotional capital is another reference that I've heard it referred to. But its basis for me, it has been foundational in terms of Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence. So share with me how you've come to learn and get skilled in the topic of emotional competence.
So, as I said, I've spent 30 years in institutional relationship management, dealing with corporations, in the billions of dollars. And as part of my role in relationship management, I've had the opportunity and the responsibility to learn how to better connect with people, communicate, and influence. And so one of my employers, at least one of the employers, had me go through emotional intelligence and really learn about emotional intelligence. And in doing so, I was just fascinated with the topic, with the subject matter, with the concept. And that led me to explore it further beyond just using it, but really understanding it and eventually deciding to pursue my own certification in emotional intelligence, to really look at it not as a tool just for how I can be a better professional, but how I can impact the world.
Absolutely.
So clearly I'm familiar with Daniel Goleman. Some consider him, the grandfather of emotional intelligence. There are other authors that I've also studied. There's a wonderful book, The Emotional Intelligence and Your Success, by Dr. Stephen Stein and Dr. Howard Book. Really great beginners course in terms of understanding it. And then Dr. Daniel Green did a book, The EQ Shinobi. It's really looking at emotional intelligence and how it applies to modern business. So that's really my background. That's rooted me in emotional intelligence. And that's where I really try to help people succeed. How does it help you in your business? And crossing over to, of course, your personal life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great when you can get that connection and it impacts people, not just for work, but for their being. And as a coach, that's so very important to work with the individual, of their who they are, and then how that translates into, what they do. Right.
Yep.
So I love the fact that you talked about the relationship management component, which is, if you think about it, self-awareness being at the foundation, right, of that. And then how are you managing yourself? How are you managing yourself in the context of others with the social awareness? And then relationship management, how am I using this to communicate, to influence others, as you talked about in your world of work, but that self-awareness, kind of being the foundation, the building block. And I know that that's something that we tend to focus on a lot initially as we're working with clients and leaders on development around the whole leader, with emotional competence, emotional intelligence being a part of that. So how are you applying emotional competence to your coaching practice today?
Well, I think one of the key word there is competence, right? It is understanding the value of emotional intelligence and being able to apply it into your work world today, into your life today, understanding how it's impacting you and those around you. One of the things we're seeing in particular in today's work world is helping employees realize that your technical skills, while they're very important, more employers are looking at ways of using technology to outsource some of those technical skills. And what they're looking for today is, how do you fit within my organization, right? How do you communicate within the organization and with external partners and vendors? Your ability to influence, your ability to manage yourself as well as manage others, your ability to think critically and be aware of those things that influence your decision making, right? And your critical thinking. And so we really try to, work with, whether it's leaders, organizations, or individuals, to help them, one, become more self-aware, because that's where emotional intelligence begins, right?
Right.
That self-awareness of how I'm interacting with the world and how the world is responding to me, And then finally, expression. That self-expression is another really key part, understanding that your self-expression can often be mirrored back to you. And so as you start to understand yourself and how others may be responding to you, now we can start getting into, how do I better develop those interpersonal relationships? And what does that mean? How is my decision-making being impacted by the emotional reactions of other people? Am I letting my emotions be hijacked, or my decisions be hijacked by my emotions?
Right.
And how is stress impacting me and my decisions? And do I recognize, what some of those levers of stress are for me, some of those triggers, I guess I should say.
Right.
And can I recognize when I need to step away? And so it's really starting with getting people more aware of what is impacting them, when it is impacting them, and are their responses appropriate for whatever's taking place at the moment.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you talked about the responses, to understand those triggers so that they're responding appropriately versus reacting. That's a key component, I think, of the emotional competence development that we do with individuals and leaders that we're working with. So I think that was important to note. So thanks for sharing that. You mentioned Daniel Goleman, who's done a ton of research on this and really kind of brought this to organizations, probably back in the 80s, 90s, as the grandfather, as you referred to him. I know it's evolved. I use it in a lot of different ways. Certainly old school Daniel Goleman, foundational basics, but also I incorporate it with a model that I call energy leadership, which is something that I've learned through my coaching certifications through IPEC, where we talk about thoughts, feelings, and actions at different levels and progressing to this higher level of being in leadership, which is similar to, the relationship management that you shared here. I'm curious about how it's been evolving and how it's evolving in your practice today. So I know you mentioned EQI 2.0. Share with us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the EQI 2.0 is really just a continuing evolution of the emotional intelligence model, right? It's expanding it to incorporate deeper thought. So not more thought, but deeper thought in each one of the areas. And so it has the 5 basic components, which are self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, and stress management. And then underneath each one of those 5 major components, you have 3 additional, I guess you could call them tangents, that really delve into what it means to, what self-expression means. So again, we think about, if I just use self-perception, right? What is self-perception? It starts with, 1, how do we regard ourselves, right? How do we see ourselves in the world? We think about self-actualization, and that is our ability or desire to continue to learn and grow.
Right, that's the epitome, the pinnacle, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then the last area within self-perception is our emotional self-awareness, right? Are we aware of how our emotions are impacting not only ourselves, but those that we may be interacting with? And that just starts with, again, it's really just self-awareness, starting with me. And then you get into all the other areas. If you think about interpersonal and our ability to have empathy, not just have empathy for others, but actually demonstrate.
Yes, absolutely. And that's so needed today.
Yeah.
That's a real core competency. Yes,
exactly.
Leaders and individuals for sure.
And it really can be something as simple as, you have as a leader, you walk into your offices every day and you walk past people's desks and you go straight to your office, versus as you walk past that desk on Monday morning, just taking that moment to say, good morning. How was your weekend? Did you do anything exciting? And it's not necessarily having this long conversation, but 1, acknowledging their presence. And then 2, acknowledging them as an individual outside of just being an employee in the office.
Yes.
right? And it's incredible how that can impact how
It's the
people feel
connection. It's the
about.
people connection.
Exactly, right?
Mhm.
How they feel about you as an individual, how they feel about their organization, and how they feel about the culture. And all that goes back into creating a more inclusive,
Mhm.
engaging, and
Mhm.
productive environment,
Mhm.
culture, and organization.
Yep. It's as simple as how are you?
Yeah,
You
and
know.
so again, the 2.0 model simply breaks the components into 5 different areas so we can take a deeper dive into each one of those and apply it to our everyday lives and our business environments.
Good. Well, wow, this is interesting and certainly something that we can dive a lot deeper into. I know today we're just going to kind of give an introduction to emotional competence, emotional intelligence being that knowledge of the emotions, of those self-awareness,
Mhm.
self-management, et cetera. And the competence is really the application of the model to be able to see how that can add value to your life individually or as a leader to help you with those relationship skills that you need more at more senior levels for sure, where your technical
Yep.
competence isn't going to be what you can rely on to
Yeah.
get things done and be able to influence in the world of work. Yeah, so I appreciate you spending some time with us today to share your perspectives on emotional competence, Jeff. Thank you so much for being our guest. And if you have any more information, you can certainly reach out to us at truthenterprisepartners.com. Email Susan at truthenterprisepartners.com and my phone number 612-237-1559. And you can reach Jeff at the web at meandillc.com or email jscott at meandillc.com. Phone number 612-208-8654. And Jeff, again, we thank you for being a guest with us today. Any closing comments on the topic?
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say is, as we think about emotional intelligence, emotional competence, really helping people, I think is part of what you do, moving from a lot of us are unconsciously competent, and it's moving from that unconscious competency to conscious competency, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's now
Right.
deliberate action. And I think, that is really kind of the beauty of what I love with what you're doing with Truth Enterprises is helping people wake up to their
Yes.
ability and consciously be aware of it. And that's kind of the same way we go, moving from that unconscious where, or I'm sorry, from that conscious, I should say that conscious competency where I can drive a stick if I'm thinking about it, right? To unconscious competency, I no longer have to think about it. It's just
Yes, it's
part
a
of what I
mastery
do.
level.
Um, and that's where we're trying to get to. The same thing with being unconsciously incompetent. You just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And
Also
consciously
a blind spot,
incompetent.
right? For
Yeah,
some,
consciously incompetent to now I know I
what
need
I
to
didn't
learn
know.
more about this. So,
Absolutely. So that's
that's the
really around
last thing
that
I would
component
add
around
to.
that self-awareness piece, right? I think again that once we get that mastery and
Yeah,
continue to
so
move these levels, that's how we're elevating people, our individuals that we're leading and coaching, and our leaders elevating that leadership.
yeah, so that would be my message is challenging people to understand your level of conscious competency and incompetency and becoming consciously competent and unconsciously competent. Because those are everyday challenges in everything that we do. But when you're able to do that, you'll be surprised at just how much more you're able to accomplish with less stress and greater productivity.
Well, Jeff, thanks again for your participation. And this has been Real World Leadership with Truth Enterprise Partners. And I'm your host, Susan Johnson. Thank you for joining.